mention. One is our farm program. And our partner for that program is an organization called Israel Food Rescue. And for those of you who may be interested in helping out the many farmers across Israel who need assistance, this may be the program for you. You do not have to be capable of getting down on your hands and knees or climbing a ladder to gather fruits and vegetables. You can do whatever you are physically capable of doing. You stay in a Jerusalem hotel, go out each day to a different farm that needs help, and you may either do those more physical activities or you may sit and pack the food, which then has to be dispersed. So it's a great new program, and I encourage you to tell people about it and take a look on our website. Another fairly new program is our Holy Land program, and that is geared to our Christian volunteers. And may we remind everyone that Christians are increasing in number in Israel, not decreasing, one of the few places in the Middle East, probably the only place where that is true. And we have geared this program to those of the Christian faith who want to see, who want to see those sites that are specific to their faith group. So the Holy Land program is also fairly new. In addition, I want to promote, of course, our rehabilitation program in Reut, Rehab Center in Tel Aviv. If you can give 2 weeks of your time or even more, they also need assistance. My program, Feed the Soldiers, is pretty much filled, but I have a couple of spaces open in October, as does the archaeology program. So I encourage all of you to take a look at the website, and I will stay on the Zoom after Dan has finished his presentation to answer any questions you may have about our programs and when they may start again. So Alana, I'll let you introduce Dan, and thanks for coming.
Thanks, Bev. And Bev, if you want to put a link to the website in the chat, feel free. Okay. If everyone else can, if you're not talking, remain muted. And if you have any questions for Dan, please write them in the chat and he'll answer them when he's done. So let me just give a short intro to Dan. He's an expert on Dan Pomerantz is an expert on U.S. and international law, Israel and the Middle East, a lecturer on Israel's Reichman, IDC, and Bar Ilan universities, and is the CEO of RealityCheck, an organization dedicated to clear understanding of complex issues through robust research. Today, he's returning to VFI Educates to explain the current situation, what's going on in Israel, and to answer our questions. But he may or may not get called away to a bomb shelter right now or in the coming hour while he's talking. So just be patient with us. We can't control what's going on. If Pam disappears, if David disappears, if Dan disappears, we'll just go with it. We'll schmooze until Dan can come back and keep talking. So Dan, I'm going to hand it over to you. Thanks for coming yet again to update us.
Alana. Thanks for having me, Alana, and thanks for having me, Pamela. You guys all know how it works, right? The alarms. Some of you do. You get this. You get on your phone. You get this loud, very startling noise that overrides all of your settings and overrides your volume settings and wakes you up out of bed. And that is just to tell you that there's going to be an alarm in a few minutes. So it gives you a chance to get ready, or if you don't have a bomb shelter in your house, it gives you a chance to walk down the block to the public shelter. And then a few minutes later, you get the actual air raid siren, and from there you have 90 seconds to get into your bomb shelter. And you might be in there for 10 or 20 minutes, or you might be in there for an hour or two. In the beginning, it was an hour or two, now it's 10 or 20 minutes. But it's all the time. It's a lot like having a baby that keeps waking you up throughout the night, except the baby is an Islamist regime that wants to kill you. And also the alarm gives you a little more adrenaline. It's harder to get back to sleep afterwards. So we're all a little bit exhausted. And we wonder why Iran is doing this. Probably in the beginning, they had all these grand statements and AI images about how we're going to utterly destroy Israel and pictures of Tel Aviv up in flames and all that stuff. Obviously, that's not happening. And if you've been listening to the news, you probably hear that America has destroyed like 90% or whatever percent of Iran's missiles. And I had this moment where I was like, it's hard to believe given how often I'm going to the bomb shelter. My work gets interrupted all day, my sleep gets interrupted all night. But the truth is, there are less missiles per barrage. In June, there would be like 50 missiles in a barrage, which is a problem because at least some of them can get through the missile defense systems, such as Iron Dome is only a part of it, but there are other aspects, but Iron Dome's the most famous. And now they're sending maybe one, maybe two, maybe three per barrage, which means that the interception rate is very, very good, which is great because it helps us to not die. But it does mean that they're waking us up a lot and they're sending it out in dribs and drabs. And it seems to me, based on all the information, that Iran has this idea that if they get us losing sleep and interrupting our day, that maybe we'll start pressuring our government to just end this already. And if that's their strategy, which I think it is, they have really underestimated Israelis because there is just complete agreement here across all party lines. We understand that Iran is like the sinus infection that you get. You can stop taking the antibiotics halfway through, but that just means that the infection is going to come back. And the second time it might be antibiotic resistance. We understand that whatever sacrifices we're making right now are nothing as compared to the benefit of no longer having to live with this regime that is behind October 7th and behind so much else that we really don't want to be facing in our future. And Israelis get that. And I think Iran also had the same idea with the Gulf states, which is we're going to fire rockets on them and they're going to run to the United States saying, you got to stop this. Then they'll all put pressure on Trump and he'll back off. But so far, it seems to be the opposite. The Gulf states were afraid of getting missiles shot at them. But now that it's happening, they've decided that they're going to throw their lot in with the people who are defending them rather than the people who are shooting at them. Incidentally, here's a little figure for you. Little known fact. Remember that from Cheers? Little known fact. Little known fact is that Iran has attacked more Arab countries in 2 days than Israel has in 75 years. Another fact is that Iran in 2 days killed more Iranian civilian protesters than the number of civilians who died in Gaza in 2 years. And that's if you accept Hamas's figures, which are probably a little overblown anyway. So that gives you a sense of what we're looking at. And I think the Gulf states have finally come to realize that this double game they were playing, where they're friendly with the United States and maybe in Abraham Accords friendly with Israel, but also friendly with Iran, I think they finally realized the limitations of that game. And Iran's also playing that game with America. They're working to shut down the Straits of Hormuz, which limits the access to oil. Oil prices go up, stock markets go down, and what do Americans care about more than money, right? And at least that's the Iranian perception. And so they figure, well, that will eventually get the pressure on Trump to back off. And what they do is they double down. If firing on the Gulf states doesn't get them to pressure Trump to stop, they fire even more. If shutting down the Straits of Hormuz more or less doesn't get America too afraid, then they bomb a couple ships in the Straits of Hormuz. If firing missiles at Israel doesn't work, you fire more missiles at Israel. They double down and double down. And in fairness to Iran, that strategy has usually worked for about 47 years. And it's worked by other terror organizations too. They double down and America backs off and other countries back off. And to be honest, that's a little bit of an indictment of us. Even Israel has had this sort of philosophy of containment for many years, which on October 7th we realized never actually was working at all. We just thought it was. And as any gambler knows, if you double down for long enough, eventually you will lose. And the nature of doubling down is that when you lose all your chips. And if you don't have any chips left, you can't stay in the game. And that may be where Iran is heading right now. Let me take a step back just to say for a moment, I'm not going to talk too long because I want you guys to ask a lot of questions. I'd like the conversation to flow with what you're curious about, because it might be different than what I'm curious about. So I'm going to just say that as questions occur to you, even now, start putting them in the chat right away, because then when we get there, we'll have a nice, good list of questions, and that can sort of take us through a bunch of our time here. But I'll say this, that not only did Iran massively underestimate Israel and misjudge the Gulf states, they've also misjudged America. The stock market is down by about 2.5%, which is not nothing, but it's not like crisis levels. And oil is up to $95, which is high, but it's been high like that before, and our economy is managed like that before, and there are all sorts of economic tools that America can use. But basically what Iran is doing here, between the propaganda and the oil and all this stuff, it's a strategic weapon to try and get this war to end early. But America has strategic weapons too, like working with other oil-producing nations to increase the supply, like sending the U.S. Navy to police the Straits of Hormuz and try to protect ships, releasing from America's strategic oil reserves. And that's the reason why the American markets are not as bad as they could be yet. We'll see what the future holds, but whatever Iran is doing, America has ways of countering that. And it's interesting to note, by the way, that when this war began, support for it, now these figures vary depending on which studies you look at, but the most recent figures I looked at showed that before February 28th, support for a war with Iran was 53% among Republicans, which is a small margin of support, and 7% among Democrats. But of course, Republicans here is what matters, A, because it's the president's base of support, and B, because they control both houses of Congress. And so because of both of those things, that was what really mattered. And I think the president felt that he had enough support to at least get started. Now that we're in this, support among Republicans is 85%, and among Democrats is 14%, which is still low, but it's double what it used to be. So if anything, that shows us that Iran's strategy, at least so far, is not working, not with Israel, the Gulf states, or with the United States. And you know, we hope that that it'll stay that way. So that is basically what Iran's real weapon is. Now, one of the ways that Trump counters this is he makes statements like, oh, I think the war's going to end pretty soon. I think it's not going to be too much longer, right? But then in another statement, he'll say, we're going to go as long as it takes. It could be weeks, it could be months. And most of the people in Trump's cabinet, like Witkoff and the generals like Kane, they're all out there saying it's going to take as long as it takes and we're not going to stop and maybe we'll put boots on the ground. So what are you to believe? And here's the trick, and this is something that's really useful in the work that we do at RealityCheck. By the way, if you don't know, I'm the CEO of RealityCheck, research.org. We have lots of great information there that you can always look at. The way we look at things is if a politician says something, my first thought isn't, is it true? Maybe it is, maybe it's not. My first thought is, why are they saying that? Who's the real audience and what purpose does it serve? And if somebody's saying, well, this war is going to end soon, when someone says that, when the president says that, he is speaking to the stock market. And statements like that, you see, when he says that, the stock market goes up, oil prices go down. And then the next day, Iran blew up a couple of ships in the Straits of Hormuz. Suddenly, oil prices go back up and the stock market goes down. And so it's this constant sort of battle of the narrative. But I believe the president's strategy is that if he can say, well, it's not going to last too long, that buys him a little bit of time. And in that time, he can show enough progress, develop a certain amount of control over the Straits of Hormuz and take that control away from Iran and take the control over oil shipments away from Iran. And as that time goes on, even if the war continues to last longer, the narrative starts becoming, well, we're winning this. A couple of myths and facts I want to address. People say that Americans don't like war. And I'd say Americans don't like wars that they don't understand. Americans don't like wars when they feel that people are dying for no reason. But Americans are willing to get behind a cause that they believe is just and important. And another thing is Americans love winning. And when things are going well, you see the support increase for that right away. And that's something that I think Iran has vastly underestimated about the strength of the American character. Now, in the meantime, part of the reason we kept getting woken up at night all the time is because we're not just getting hit by Iran, we're also getting hit by Hezbollah. You remember Hezbollah? They seemed to disappear for a little while. Well, they're back now. And Israel's response is, we're not doing a tit for tat. You fire one rocket, we blow up an outpost. Israel's response was, you fire one rocket, we are going to full-fledged war. And Israel's been doing that. And now Israel is taking very strong action against Hezbollah. There's even talk that, you know, what we say with Hezbollah is always that they should be beyond the Litani River. That's sort of this dividing line within Lebanon. South of the Litani River is close to Israel. North of the Litani River is a little farther away. The peace treaty from 2006, or ceasefire treaty from 2006, Hezbollah is not supposed to exist south of the Litani River, but they do. And the UN body called UNIFIL was completely useless at policing that. And so now there's some talk in Israel that maybe Israel will just take over Lebanon up to the Litani River and push all of the people living south of the Litani River north of the Litani River. And that will just become either a no man's land or an Israeli area until Hamas is truly and fully gone. And the answer to Lebanon will be, you want that land back? Get rid of Hezbollah. And there's been a sense in Israel of lack of patience here with the government of Lebanon, which Israel feels has not done everything they can. Even the government of Lebanon has limited power against Hezbollah, but even what's within their power, Israel feels they haven't been doing. Now, I don't want to say what Israel will do or won't do. It may be that this is just a threat to get the government of Lebanon to step up, to get the people of Lebanon to care about this more, maybe. But these are sort of the things that we're hearing, the possibilities that are on the table. What's for certain is that Hezbollah is firing at us, and Israel is operating very strongly against Hezbollah. And when the operations in Iran start to wind down, the operation against Hezbollah will have access to more air support because our jets won't be all occupied out there. Not all occupied out there, but many of them are right now. So there's one journalist in Israel who said that you've heard the expression, someone commits suicide by cop, like they want to commit suicide, so they run at a cop in order to get shot. This journalist, his name's Amit Segal, he said that Lebanon is committing suicide by IDF because there's no way they can win that. But just like Iran, all they know how to do is double down. And in fairness to them, for a lot of decades, it has worked. And that's a bit of a condemnation of us. But it seems like we've gotten past that. So a couple of more things to say. I'll just address some of the big claims that we hear out there. One is this could lead to instability, right? The Iran regime could collapse and we could have instability. And the West seems to have this allergy to instability. Let me start by saying this. Most of the instability in the Middle East is from Iran. They sponsor terror groups. They destroy nations from the inside, such as Yemen, such as Lebanon. So by definition, the end of the Iranian regime increases stability in the Middle East. Second of all, I don't think it's at all certain that Iran will become unstable. There are a lot of opposition groups. They have a high degree of organization. They are apparently behind the scenes getting some help and guidance and weapons from the Mossad and the CIA. And that means that America and Israel don't have to completely defeat the Iranian regime, but just weaken the regime enough so that the opposition groups have a real fighting chance. So I don't think it's for certain that Iran will become unstable. But let's imagine, for the sake of argument, a worst case scenario. Everything falls apart. Iran becomes essentially like Iraq after 2003, where you have all these groups like ISIS and other militias, and it's just chaos and bloodshed. All right? ISIS never had ballistic missiles, and they certainly never had intercontinental ballistic missiles capable of reaching the United States, which Iran says proudly they're working on. ISIS never had a nuclear weapons program. And for all those reasons, when we had to fight ISIS, it was much easier, much less costly, much less deadly than having to fight a nation state like Iran. So even in a worst case scenario, chaos composed of a bunch of random militia groups is still preferable to the regime we have right now, which not only creates instability throughout the Middle East, but is a stable threat to America. And a stable threat is much worse than an unstable situation that's less of a threat. Second of all, what's the morality? I saw this meme on the other day where somebody said, "Why are we fighting a war with Iran? Explain it to me like I'm a 5-year-old." And my first thought was, I actually wrote this comment, why do adults have the brains of 5-year-olds? Explain it to me like I'm an adult. But to put it really simply, I don't know if this is what a 5-year-old would get, but to put it in very simple terms, and I've had to say this to a few friends in America who didn't get it, Iran is coming for you. Full stop, period. Before Pearl Harbor, America thought we were immune from the world. We weren't. Then we thought that again before 9/11, and we discovered we weren't. America is not immune from this. And then I have a friend who says, oh, I remember that whole thing, weapons of mass destruction, and that was all a big lie, so why should I believe this? This is not Iraq in 2003. Iran has said, they proudly say it. If you look at the articles that I write, I have links to this. Their top leadership brags to the world that they are developing intercontinental ballistic missiles with a range of such and such kilometers, which, if you do the math, is capable of reaching the United States and all of Europe. They also basically say that they're developing nuclear weapons. They don't say it in those words. But what they say is, here's how it works. There's two types of uranium. There's the weapons kind, and then there's the kind that powers a nuclear electrical power plant, like where Homer Simpson works. And that's what we sometimes call peaceful purposes. These are two different kinds of uranium. Without getting into if somebody's interested in the technical details and the percentage of enrichment, we can get into that. But just to put it simply, like you would talk to a 5-year-old, although I don't know too many 5-year-olds who know much about nuclear enrichment, if you have the weapons kind, which is the kind Iran is, not only are they creating it, they're very proud of it. They not only brag about it, they sort of very fiercely state, we have the right to enrich up to such and such a level, and no one can tell us not to, and that's what we're doing, and how dare you interfere with our rights and our rights and our rights. So they are saying loud and proud that we are developing such and such kind of uranium, which is the weapons kind. The weapons kind cannot be used for civilian electrical nuclear power. It doesn't work for that. You need a different kind of uranium for that. And unlike something like copper or steel, which you can use for 1,000 different things, weapons-grade uranium cannot be used for different things. It can be used for one thing and one thing only, and that's making a nuclear bomb. So Iran has basically said, we're making a nuclear bomb. They didn't say it in those words, but they said they are making the weapons kind of uranium, which can't be used for anything other than making a nuclear bomb. The comparison I made in one of my articles is, it's a little bit like if I admit that I bought a gun, but then I tell you, well, the only reason I bought it is to help me change diapers and to cook. Be like, what? Guns aren't useful for changing diapers. They don't work for that. And in the same way, 60% enriched uranium does not work for peaceful purposes. You need a different kind of uranium for that. So we know, because Iran has said so, that they are doing things that will result in them being able to attack the United States of America on American shores with nuclear weapons. This is coming. Another thing to keep in mind is that there is an element of China behind all of this. China is Iran's main source of funding right now, and their main source of weaponry. These weapons, these missiles being shot at us, those are Chinese missiles, or at least much of it is Chinese components. And so we call them Iranian missiles because Iran's firing them. But China is to some extent behind that. And there's a certain, I'm trying to figure out how to explain this right. I used to ask myself, years ago, I used to ask, why doesn't Israel just destroy Iran's nuclear weapons program with one quick strike? They did it with Iraq in 1981. They did it with Syria in 2007. Why don't they do the same thing? Well, now we know part of the reason is because Iran has their nuclear program in a bunch of different locations, hidden under mountains, lots of redundancy. It's not so easy. But the other reason is because if Israel would have struck Iran, Iran would have immediately triggered Hezbollah, which had something like 250,000. It was between 150,000 to 250,000 rockets and missiles that would fire simultaneously at Israel. And Iran would fire its missiles. And it would activate Hezbollah and the forces in Syria and Yemen. And having been through the missile barrages in June, I can tell you that that level of missile barrage, Israel's defenses cannot handle that. Israel would be utterly destroyed just from the missiles, and you'd have people pouring in from all the borders, from Gaza, from Syria, from Lebanon with the Radwan forces. So Iran was basically immune. So what do? Israel started taking all the chess pieces off the board. First Hamas, which still exists and is still a problem, and we're still fighting them. And by the way, Pamela still needs donations to get equipment and clothing for these soldiers. They're still an issue, but they're no longer a strategic threat in the way that they can take a part in the kind of war we're fighting now. And Syria no longer has Bashar Assad there, which means they no longer answer to Iran, although there are a ton of Israeli troops on the Syrian border and inside Syria, making sure that none of those jihadi factions there get any ideas that this would be a good time to attack Israel. And Hezbollah, of course, we remember the Beeper operation, and then killing Nasrallah and killing the Radwan forces and all that. Essentially, what Israel was doing was taking the chess pieces off the board one by one until we finally reached a point where we could attack Iran, and it's basically just us and Iran. Although the truth is we kind of are fighting Hezbollah as well right now, but not in the way we would have had to fight them a couple of years ago. So it's taking pieces off the chessboard. And I think that's to some extent also what's happening right now with respect to China. It's very clear that the United States is going to be in a direct confrontation with China within the next couple of years. And if China has Iran acting as a proxy, and previously they had Venezuela was a Chinese proxy. A lot of people don't realize that. They had Hezbollah and Hamas in Venezuela. They had Iran there, and they also had Russia and China calling the shots, and that's no longer the case. So you can see there's a certain element of the United States doing what Israel did before, which is taking pieces off the chessboard. There's a certain irony in that Iran was the master of the proxies, but in a way they were also a proxy themselves. So that's that's sort of the morality behind this. This is self-defense, not just for Israel, but for the United States as well, even if not all Americans fully realize it, but it is certainly true. Another thing is I get questions about international law and also American domestic law. In terms of international law, the argument is that this is a war of choice, that America or Israel or both started this war and didn't have to, and that violates international law, maybe. Here's the truth. Iran has been killing thousands of Americans and Israelis and Europeans for years. Sometimes they do it through their proxies. But if you say that, well, it's not really Iran because it's through their proxies, that's like saying I hired a hitman to kill you, but I didn't actually kill you because it was the hitman who did it. Like, no. If you hired the person, paid the person, and directed the person who to kill, you have committed murder, period. And so when Iran does exactly the same thing, pays people, trains them, equips them, and then tells them who to go and kill, that's Iran. There's no way around that. So Iran, both directly and through its proxies, has been killing people for years. In December, Iran's President Pezeshkian said, Iran is in a state of total war against the United States, Israel, and Europe. And they're carrying that out with actual kinetic actions that kill people. And they're also carrying it out by building out the capacities to attack Israel or to attack the United States right at home. So they're both saying that they're at war and they're acting on that. And of course, in their parliament, you know how like in school we stand up and say the Pledge of Allegiance at the beginning of the day? In their parliament, at the beginning of their sessions, they stand up and say, death to America, death to Israel. So both in their rhetoric and in their actions, they are acting in a state of war against the United States. That's self-defense, and self-defense does not violate international law. Now, there are some rules. I mean, you can't just go kill anybody. You know, you have to act in self-defense by defending against the military assets and not targeting civilians. But certainly, this is not a war of choice or a war that America created or that Israel created. It is a war that America and Israel finally chose to respond to. The other thing is, did the president have to consult with Congress? If somebody's interested in the details, I'll get into the legal geeking out of that. But the long and short of it is that, no, the president does not have to consult with Congress with this. The argument is, but only Congress can declare war. That's in the Constitution. It's like, yeah, you know the last time Congress declared war? World War II. How many military actions, really wars, but really military actions have we had since then? Dozens, under presidents from both parties. And over and over and over again, the Supreme Court has ruled that that is consistent with the Constitution. There's also something called the War Powers Act of 1973, which sets certain things that the president has to do, but it does not say that the president needs Congress's permission to go to war. And it just says that there's certain reporting requirements. Again, if you want to get into the details of that, ask in the questions, and we can. But the bottom line is no. And I love these polls that say, do you think the president has to get permission from Congress? It's like, that's a law. Why would you ask someone their opinion about a law? Like, would you ask that question if it was like biochemistry or something? You know, it's like the law, like you can have an opinion about whether the law is right, but you kind of don't get an opinion about what the law is. The law says what it says, And to the extent there's any interpretation, that gets decided by the Supreme Court. And my job as somebody who practiced law for many years and now writes and teaches about law, my job is to understand what the law says and how it has been interpreted by the courts. So although there were 2 votes in Congress, a vote by both in the House and in the Senate, both of those votes tried to pass a resolution that would prevent the president from going to war. Without getting into the legal nitty-gritty, both of those resolutions would have been toothless. Even if they passed, they would not have prevented anything, but they didn't pass. So the bottom line is Congress has spoken. The voice of Congress is not one particular congressperson making a bunch of noise. The voice of Congress is its vote. And in both the House and in the Senate, Congress has voted on these resolutions and made the decision that at least for now, they are not going to interfere with this military action. Congress may come up with a different idea in the future, but for now, that is that's Congress's position. And that is that. Oh, and also, I think I'll show you a little video. This is actually a video that I recorded in June, but it relates to the legal aspects, so I thought I would just share it with you. And then from there, we'll go straight into the questions. And so now let's see if I share this correctly.
Where you hit like shares for sound and video quality.
Yeah, so I gotta make sure I do all of that, but it's not showing me the thing I want to see here. So let me try this again. If I open this, okay, now it'll let me share. And do I have to click to share sound? Here we go. Share sound, optimize for video sharing. All right, let's see if this works. If it doesn't work, somebody shout at me.
Okay.
We all see this here?
Yep.
We also see this nice redheaded girl on I-24?
Yes.
All right.
Now, as Israel continues to strike targets in Iran, there's a narrative emerging from Iran's allies like Russia and China that this violates international law.
They see that they can't defeat the IDF on the battlefield, so they want to try and defeat Israel off the battlefield. Under international law, under the principles of the United Nations, you're never supposed to start a war. You can respond in self-defense if someone attacks you. So they're saying this isn't self-defense. Israel attacked Iran. It's obvious. There was nothing going on. Then Israel attacked. But of course, that's not true. And it's not true for 2 reasons. One is that under Article 51 of the UN Charter, a country has an inviolate right, an absolute right to self-defense. And in this case, well, they'll say, but you're not defending yourself, you're attacking. Well, Iran has been attacking Israel for years, but especially for the last 19 months since October 7th, both directly and through its proxies. Over 30,000 rockets directly and through its proxies, including directly from Iran, the largest ballistic missile strike in the history of the world. That was a year ago. In addition to that, there's also something called the Caroline Doctrine, which says that if an attack is imminent, if it is urgent and there is no other choice, then you can respond even before the physical attack starts. That's a kind of proactive self-defense. And in this case, all of those factors are met. Just hours before Israel launched its operation, the IAEA, that's the International Atomic Energy Agency, announced that Iran was in violation of the NPT, that's the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. In other words, that's a statement by a UN body in charge of inspecting nuclear facilities that Iran is going nuclear. In addition to that, Israel had intelligence that Iran was getting ready to go nuclear. And in addition to that, Iran for years has never been shy about saying that one of its goals as a nation is to annihilate Israel and, of course, the United States as well.
Well, there you have it. So with that, I guess you have I also have a couple of nice videos of me running to bomb shelters, but I think you guys have already seen plenty of that. If you don't know what a bomb shelter here looks like, I'll send pictures around next time. One last thing I'd like to tell you is that the thing that we're working on now at RealityCheck that we're really excited about, we, by the way, are also a 501c3. We're a charity. Donations to us are tax deductible. We're working on an AI platform. The first step is we've written hundreds of articles since October 7th. We took all of them and we're training this AI platform on our articles so that you could ask this platform anything you would ask me and it would answer in the same way I would answer. If you ask ChatGPT about this stuff, it might give you a whole bunch of anti-Israel stuff or AI slop that's incorrect. You ask our platform, it'll give you the right answer. We're already using a classified version of that platform with the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Prime Minister's office, and they frequently use our platform to get answers quickly to difficult questions that they need. Let's say the spokesperson's about to go on television He knows he's going to be asked, does X violate international law? He asks my platform, gives him an answer. He can even type in, give me a quick answer that works for a press conference. And it comes with links to the original articles and the sources. And something we're working on right now, very diligently and quickly as we can, is we're training the AI platform on all of the data regarding strikes, both in Iran, the Gulf states, in Israel, all the missile launches, all the different damage, so that you can, and putting in satellite images before and after, so that you can then ask it, how many missile strikes were there yesterday? How many were there last week? Has the pace of missile strikes gone up or down? What's the trend look like? How many are in this country or that country? What's happening in the Straits of Hormuz? And you can get all that detailed data. If you Google it or you ask ChatGPT, it'll look for an article that someone wrote in the New York Times talking about it. But our platform will actually base it on the actual data, on the actual counting of thousands and thousands of strikes over the different dates. So these are the sorts of things we're working on. This, again, we also want to make available to the general public, but we only have the classified version right now. But that's something that we're working on. We need a $500,000 budget. We already have half of it, which we're thrilled about, and we're raising the rest of it. So that's my little pitch for the work that we do. And with that, let's go on for questions.
Thank you so much, Dan. And I put the link to RealityCheck in the chat. If anyone needs me to put it in there again, I will. Please go on and donate. Obviously a noble cause. This sounds like a great AI. You know, my partner and I always check like with Siri or the Amazon Echo, and it's like the stuff it leaves out is hilarious, and we try to train it and it doesn't work. So I'm glad you're making this. We're up to 100 people today. I think that's all we can fit in this room right now. So great job. And it looks like we have a lot of questions. It also looks like there's another Ilan in this group. Okay, so the first question, and if you answered these, we'll just go to the next one. Are the Hezbollah attacks in northern Israel being organized from Iran or independent?
They are being coordinated with Iran. In fact, sometimes they actually coordinate to fire them at the exact same time. But Hezbollah does also continue to act independently as well. And the thinking right now is that even if Iran collapses, there's still going to be additional work to get Hezbollah to become, if not gone, at least non-functional as an organization.
Lavette asks, how hard is it to get to a bomb shelter? Are most close? Does everyone have one?
Not everyone has one. I'm very fortunate. I have a bomb shelter on my floor, so I get to go in there and meet the neighbors, and I live in a modern building, so it's a very good, well-built shelter. Many people have to go down to the ground floor, and there's one down in the basement levels, which is actually what I have to do when I'm at work in my office. We have to go all the way down to a shelter that's 4 floors beneath ground level, so I get a lot of Stairmaster throughout the day going up and down stairs. Some people don't have them in their house, and in that case, they have to go to the nearest public shelter. Also, Tel Aviv has a brand spanking new subway system. It's almost like we're a real life city now. And that subway was built with exactly this in mind. So the subway tunnels are built to withstand that. And so in the public shelters and in the subways, you can see people hanging out there at night. If people don't want to have to get up and run to the nearest shelter at night, they might just camp out in the shelter in the subway, and they bring tents. And sometimes they have parties. There was at least one wedding reception that took place there. And of course, there were certainly Purim parties. And all of you probably are already aware of this, but Purim is the story of almost getting destroyed by forces in Persia 2,500 years ago and managing to come out on top. And so that connection is not lost on Israelis.
I think they said that like any building that's built before 1992 or something would not have been built with a mamad.
Well, not any building, because some of them certainly were, but after a certain year, and it may be 92, all buildings had to have them.
Right.
Before 92, some of them would have. And by the way, that's part of the reason that we have this app on the phone, because it used to be, even before we had phones and apps, you would just hear the siren and you had however many seconds you had. And from Tel Aviv, it might be 90 seconds, but if you were on the Gaza border, it might only be 15 seconds. With missiles coming from Iran, it takes them longer to get there. We have better radars and we have apps. And that gives people the ability to leave their homes and go to the nearest shelter, even if it takes a few minutes to walk there.
Great. Robin is asking, if Israel and the USA double down, then why won't we eventually give up this time? Who's behind Iran besides Russia and China? So 2 different questions.
Okay, well, but behind Iran, the only parties that I'm aware of are Russia and China. Doesn't mean that I know everything, but that's what I'm aware of. Will the question about giving up is, I mean, if you look at the lay of the land, it's like what I was saying before. The stock market's down a little bit, but not a lot. And the oil is up a little bit, but still not to crisis levels. And every time Trump makes a statement about we're going to add Navy escorts in the Straits of Hormuz, then the oil prices go back down and the stock market goes back up. And if you look at the polling, you can see that American support has been growing rather than shrinking. And certainly support in Israel is strong across all political borders, across every side of the aisle. There's no disagreements in Israel on an issue like this. And certainly the Gulf states have come around. So I'd say that as long as you see support continuing or even growing, and as long as you see the United States taking the kind of actions that are required to not only win the kinetic war, but also to protect the economy and the safety of the soldiers and the American people, as long as that's going on, then America can continue safely until it accomplishes its specific war goals.
Bev, I just want to make sure you see Matt Carmel's, if you're still there, his comment. He wants to volunteer. David Eisenberg says, what is your feeling if the Iranian people do not rise up and start turning the tide of the brutal regime to its end? What will Israel do and what will the U.S. do?
You know, it's hard to know what will happen. I mean, when you start thinking multiple moves in advance, it's like, will they rise up or won't they rise up? And if they do, will it go this direction or that direction? If they don't, will it go this direction or that direction? But I will say this, it reminds me of another related question. There are people who say you cannot accomplish regime change through air campaigns alone. But we saw that did happen in Kosovo with Slobodan Milosevic. It did happen in Libya with Gaddafi. And in fact, in Kosovo, there was a significant gap between the war, which weakened Milosevic, until there was actually that regime change. And then eventually it took 9 years before Kosovo actually became independent. So it's possible. There are so many scenarios. And if you want to read op-eds, you can find conjecture on all of these things. One possible scenario is that America and Israel weaken the regime up to a point, and then there's sort of a pause where nothing seems to be happening, and then someone takes over later. That's one possibility. It's possible someone could take over sooner. This could go any number of different ways. And so there's any amount of speculation, but I can tell you that Israelis definitely understand Iran as being the sinus infection, that if you only get rid of it halfway, it's going to come back, and it's going to come back worse. And we don't want to have to do this every few years. And I think my impression is that the leadership in America and many Americans, if not all Americans, are beginning to understand that as well.
The next question is actually mine. We're starting to hear now that Israel is running low on Iron Dome interceptors and that they won't be getting more by the time they need them. Can you say anything to that? Speak to that?
Yeah, I hear a lot of conflicting things, and I don't actually think that's true. That's the first thing. Second thing, Iron Dome, by the way, Iron Dome is for short range rockets, like the kind that come from Gaza. Then you have the David Sling is mid range. Then there's the Arrow 2 and Arrow 3. Arrow 3 can actually take out rockets while they're in outer space before they descend back into the atmosphere. And by the way, sometimes before the siren sounds, I'll look out my window and I'll see orange specks in the sky. And that's these rockets burning up on reentry. It's a very creepy thing to see. And then I think the Arrow 4 has been developed. I'm not sure if it's being used yet, but the Arrow 4 can blow up rockets even farther out into outer space. And there's also now the Iron Beam for the short range stuff, and for the drones, the Iron Beam takes them out with lasers, which you never run out of as long as you have electricity. So I don't actually believe that we're running low. If we are, I certainly haven't heard about it. I'm in touch with public and non-public sources. In public, I hear contradictory things. Non-publicly, I have not heard that. And also you add to that the fact that the barrages are so small that in June, we might have one barrage could have 50 missiles. Now one barrage might have 1 or 2 missiles. So even if we have 10 barrages in a day, the amount of interceptors we're using is less than what we would have for one barrage in June. Right. So I'm not terribly convinced that that's the case right now.
That's good to hear. Sharon's asking, do you think we will hear about attacks on Iran's nuclear program?
I mean, there already have been attacks. It depends what you mean by program. There already are attacks on Iran's various nuclear sites where they build things, where they do things. Sort of the big eyes on the prize question is are they going to do with Iran's enriched uranium, which is in some underground site now that apparently they couldn't get to because America blew up the entrances, but it's still in there. And we don't know what's going to happen with that, but it's entirely possible that if they do try and go and get it, America can just blow up anyone who's going near the entrance. And eventually, it could be there will be a special forces operation to go in and pull it out. It could be that something else will happen. As America and Israel begin to get complete control over Iran's airspace, right now they mostly have control, but they're getting to a point where they're going to have complete control. And when you have complete control, you can do a lot of things. You could put special forces in there to take out uranium, and no one can touch them because they would have total air cover around them. They can do other amazing things too, which is you're going to get to a point where protesters are going to come out, and if the Basij or the IRGC try to come and kill them, well, there's going to be drones just circling overhead ready to fire at the Iranian regime forces and protect the protesters. So a lot of things become possible as you get that air superiority. There are any number of ways that Israel and America might deal with the existing uranium, but we will. But a lot of options are on the table, and even more over time as the war progresses.
I muted myself. Terry's asking, what happened to Gaza? No one ever talks about it anymore.
Oh, there were some strikes in Gaza just the other day. Gaza is absolutely an issue right now. The IDF has had to be a little creative because they have less air support than they normally do. But they are working very hard to keep Hamas from crossing the yellow line and to keep Hamas from building capacities that could cause them to become more dangerous beyond the yellow line. And eventually, we are going to have to deal with Gaza. The fact is that all these great plans that Trump's talking about, that everyone wants to do, where you're going to rebuild Gaza, none of that works if Hamas is still there. And none of these international partners are going to go into Gaza, at least beyond the yellow line, if it means they have to fight with Hamas. And the only party that is willing to actually fight Hamas is the IDF. So at the end of the day, in my analysis, it is inevitable that eventually we will go back to some kind of actual kinetic fighting with Hamas in the same way we're doing now with Hezbollah to finish the job, which means maybe that they won't entirely not exist, but they will be diminished to the point that the international community can actually function and do some sort of rebuilding in Gaza. And by the way, every time somebody tells me you can't defeat them because you can't kill an idea and there's no military answer to this and blah, 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 blah. Guess what? There was a military answer to Nazi Germany. There was a military answer to fascist Italy. There was a military answer to Meiji Japan. It is possible to defeat these things. Yes, Nazism is an idea. There are still neo-Nazis today, but none of them own a country or control an army, and that makes a big difference. And so I don't think military alone does the trick, but military can absolutely be a part of it, and I do foresee that happening in Gaza. But by the way, I'm glad you asked that question because it reminds me, like I said before, Pamela keeps providing equipment and clothing and chapstick and energy bars and all this stuff to all of our soldiers who are still fighting on multiple different borders in Gaza, in Lebanon, in Syria, and in the West Bank, because there's constant attempts at terrorism out of there. So don't be fooled. None of this has stopped or even slowed down, and the need is still out there. So even though I'm pitching for myself and pitching for VFI, I also, Pamela's cause is very important too.
Yeah, I want to say, Pam, if you didn't put the info on how to donate to your Hamal in the chat, please do. Okay. Rob had followed that up with did Gaza elect someone else besides Hamas? What about Yemen and the Houthis?
Did Gaza elect or would Gaza elect? I don't think I quite understand the question.
Robin said, did Gaza elect someone else?
Well, Gaza hasn't had elections since 2005. So no, they haven't elected anybody in about 21 years. And right now, outside of the yellow line, Israel the IDF is in control. Inside of the yellow line, Hamas is in control. There are some opposition groups that are trying to fight them, but overall, Hamas does seem to have control right now. And by the way, Hamas is far and away the most popular group of any kind in in Palestinian society, whether it's the West Bank or Gaza. If there were elections today, Hamas would win by a landslide. The vast majority of Palestinians support Hamas, and they support the October 7th massacre. And to the extent some Palestinians don't, the reason, and we know this is because they say so, the reason is because of the impact October 7th had on us. That would be the reason that they would not support it or support Gaza. They never, in any polling I've seen, state the reason that because it was actually wrong to do it. So that is the state of Palestinian society right now.
Harry says, IDF says it recently struck a site where Iran advanced critical capabilities in nuclear weapons from the Times of Israel, March 12, 2026. Harry, was there a question there?
Well, in any case, it's a good thing to know. And I see reports like that frequently. There are thousands of strikes going on a constant basis right now. I think the last figure I heard was 5,000 since this started, which is roughly, around 1,000 a day. And then the thinking is that it's going to be even more now that Iran's air defenses are limited. So I believe that on a constant basis, Israel and the United States are striking regime sites, sites related to nuclear capacity, sites related to ballistic missiles, and also the supply chain that creates them. Everything that Iran has that's relevant is being struck on a constant basis.
Bev and Ilana have another question. I've seen reports that Iran's goal to deplete Israel and the U.S.'s weapon supplies so that in time they can hit us with superior weapons that they're withholding at this time. Could this concern over our weapon supplies be valid?
From what I know, the weapons, Israel and America have very significant weapon supplies and are not in any way running out. The reverse is true, though, that Israel and America are, it's not just that Iran has less missiles because they're firing them. Israel and America are blowing up the storage sites for the missiles and the launchers for the missiles. So I think the truth is actually quite the reverse of that. In terms of more advanced weapons, Iran has been firing cluster munitions at us, which violates international law because it's especially dangerous to civilians when used in an urban area. But we have been intercepting them very effectively. They have some larger munitions, like 1,000 kilogram bombs that they are threatening to fire. But again, those can be intercepted in the same way. And also, nobody's saying that they have chemical weapons. But I'm a little concerned that they might, just based on my own analysis. That might be something they're holding in reserve. But nobody I know, publicly or non-publicly, is actually talking about that. That's just me being all up in my head.
Harry, I think, is asking you about 15 questions right here, so I'll try to go through it slowly. Playing devil's advocate, would Iran do any negotiations with U.S. or Israel now? Well, negotiating, they have been hit several times. Their Pearl Harbor, taking out their head just leaves another embedded layer. Won't they go after the country's leaders? Do you see China going after Taiwan while the U.S. is diverted to the Middle East?
I mean, the answer to all of it is they're not ifs. It's yes, yes, and yes. Will they go after leaders? They tried to kill Trump twice. They tried to kill Netanyahu in his home once. So yes, they try to go after leaders. The question isn't whether they will try and we're going to shake in our boots, please don't hurt me. It's we build defenses. Unlike the Gulf states, who for years were like, please don't hurt me. Israel was like, well, we're going to do what's right and we're going to build defenses. The other question was, what was the first question?
About negotiating.
Negotiating. Yeah, they've said several times in the past week that they won't negotiate. So that's where they are right now, which is actually startling to me because if I were them, I would want to get out of this any way I could. But they've been saying quite consistently that they won't.
Hal, I'm not sure I understand your question. You're saying, will your comments be posted after this? This whole thing should be posted to YouTube in a couple of days when Steve can get it up there. Is that what you mean? If not, write it further down. And Dan, I want to be conscious of your time. I'm going to keep going. You just tell me when to stop. Okay?
Yeah, I'm doing okay. And also the time change is 1 hour less right now.
True.
So I'm less exhausted than normal. And look, we haven't even had any sirens yet.
I know.
I think
don't say that.
I think they knew that VFI was here and they decided that this was too important.
I'm sure. Oh, and it looks like, Pam, you did post how to donate to the Hamal. So please, everyone, look down there. I mean, if you want to make sure you're giving money to a place where everything's going straight to the soldiers and they're saying exactly what they need, giving to Pam's Hamal is the way to go. If you can't give, please share it on your socials like I do. Okay, I'm just going, some of them are just comments. David saying, does it appear that the military action so far will lead to regime change?
Military action alone won't, but like I said, all we have to do is weaken Iran enough so that the many groups out there have a fighting chance. And we know that behind the scenes, Mossad and CIA are already involved in helping them to organize and arm. And there's a lot happening here all at once. So I believe it is highly likely that this entire operation, which is not just war, but also war and organizing and opposition groups and diplomatic work, I believe this has a very high likelihood of leading to regime change. There's even a possibility, though, that it could take the Kosovo path, which is that the war ends and then sometime later the regime finally completely collapses. So all of this we don't know exactly how it could happen, but I would say this. 2003, the Iraq War, was almost 30 years ago. We should not think of this war in terms of what came before. The technology that exists today, the methods that exist today are unlike anything that's existed. The principles of warfare remain, but if people in 2003 could see what we were doing today and could see under the hood what we're doing with drones and AI, they would think it was a science fiction movie. And so it's not just that you have a bigger bomb, it's that there are capabilities to accomplish things that one couldn't have accomplished in the past.
I'm going to read Aleta's, it's a comment/question. I think it's important. Dan, I subscribe to and greatly appreciate your newsletter, donate to RealityCheck, and I'm including RealityCheck in my estate planning. I have been greatly disturbed and disappointed of late by some high-profile conservative internet media personalities whom Ben Shapiro refers to as the horseshoe right. We don't really talk about politics here so much, like Tucker Carlson and Megyn Kelly, to name a couple. I long for you to fire back and school them along the lines of what you publish in your newsletters. Any chance you could reach out to them and their audiences directly in any effort to push back on the insanity they're putting out there? Have you tried to get an audience with either of them?
I frequently do write on those topics, and yes, to be clear, I am just as disturbed by the Tucker Carlson horseshoe right crowd as I am by the Rashida Tlaib crowd on the left. And I write about it frequently, and that material is out there for you guys to use. I have not yet been able to reach out to them directly, but I will make an effort to do that and see if I can't have an impact, maybe a little bit behind the scenes. Sometimes I do manage to have an impact behind the scenes. Oftentimes, though, I put those efforts into things like reaching out to, say, a European government that's about to put an arms embargo on Israel and help convince them to not do that. Not me alone, but I work with other parties and with the Israeli government. And we work to try and keep Israel safe in ways that have a real impact in terms of law and policy. But sometimes reaching out behind the scenes to people who are making a lot of noise is important as well.
Amy says, and I haven't heard of this, but evidently Trump told secret microchips or sold secret microchips to Saudi Arabia, even though it's likely they will then give them to China. And then they can create ammo with these chips that were kept from them in the past. Are you aware of this? And do you believe this poses a threat to both the U.S. and Israel?
I'm not aware of that. I know that America does sell chips to China, but only up to a certain level of sophistication. So there's some chips that are forbidden to China, and there are other chips that we do sell to China. And that's actually a positive thing, because by making China dependent on American chips, we can cut off the supply anytime we want. But we're also careful not to give them the very, very best chips. I hadn't heard that particular story, so I'll take a look into it.
Yeah. Ted says, and this is the question, why does the American media present the version of the Iranian conflict in what appears to be anti-American and anti-Israel in that way?
Yeah, why is an interesting question. I mean, you're getting into people's psychology. Right. I think to some extent, you have a lot of the mainstream media has a left-leaning kind of bias, which means they want to oppose anything Trump did. Some of the media has, the Tucker Carlson type media has a bias that's far off in the other direction, thinking that America first means allowing a country to get weapons that can kill Americans. And and so depending which media you look at, they take these positions that seem anti-American, but I think maybe they think of it as just being anti whichever political figure they're against. I saw a great segment on Bill Maher where he was interviewing a Democratic senator, and he said, "Well, the view about whether you need permission from Congress to take out to take this action is," and he gives some explanation, and he says, "I mean, does that sound too vague for you?" And the senator says, "Yes, that's absolutely too vague. It shouldn't work that way." And then Bill Maher cuts him off and says, "Because that's what Obama said during Libya." And then the senator is like, and it just goes to show you a lot of what you hear is like they don't even believe the things they're saying. They're just taking a political side. And when the other politician is doing the same thing, they flip their rhetoric.
Anne says, any thoughts on what the Houthis are likely to do? They've been extremely quiet so far.
They have. And I don't know if they will commit suicide by IDF, but if they do, Israel has much more intelligence about the Houthis than they did a couple years ago. They also have now resources in Somaliland, which is right across the way from Yemen. So it's like it used to be only America that had bases in America, but also bases in the Middle East and bases in Germany. And now for the first time, Israel's got a base somewhere outside of Israel. And so if Yemen does decide to take any kind of action, they'll regret it very quickly. And if they don't, I'm guessing that after Iran falls, America and the United States will take some action there as well, because we can't live in a world where a bunch of Houthis have the ability to shut down global shipping. That just doesn't work.
This is kind of an interesting question, if you could just answer it. Kathy's asking, how do people with disabilities manage getting to bomb shelters?
Well, you would have to either have a bomb shelter that's accessible. So, for example, some people have them in their house. In my case, it's on my floor. But if you don't have that, you would either have to have a way of getting there that you can do within the time, or you just have to stay there. And some people are just kind of people who don't have bomb shelters in their home will stay there, live there, and just, pitch a tent there, something like that. So, you find, or, maybe if you, some people will go stay with family. Like if you don't have a bomb shelter that's handicap accessible, but your family member has one in their home, maybe you go visit, your cousins and stay in their place for a while. It's the sort of Israeli creative thing. You find if there's people who can help you out, family who can help you out, whatever solution, but everyone manages to find a way.
Okay. This is, Gail says the stock market indicates the wealth of the upper class in America, not the ordinary population. At a cost of $1 billion plus per day to support U.S. troops, the U.S. budget will soon have to cut support of Americans on the edge of poverty. Approximately how much, I don't know if this is a question for Dan, approximately how much money will Israel need to combat weapons sent from Arab countries? And how long do you think ordinary Americans will be able to sustain the outlay of these monies?
Well, first of all, the budget for the United States is set at the beginning of every year, and that includes the military budget. And so whatever is being allocated to help people in need in America has already been allocated, and it doesn't come out of the military budget. And if the military were spending less, it doesn't mean that military money would necessarily go to the cause that you have in mind. And also if you consider the sheer scale of America's total budget, which is enormous, there is room in it to do all the things that are budgeted for. And to the extent that there's not, America issues more debt, and that creates other problems issuing debt. But for the time being, the budgets allocated for different things are already allocated. And that's not changing in the near term. And if it does change, it would change because the American public and members of Congress have made a policy decision to change that.
Rob's asking, how much of the tunnel system has been destroyed in Gaza? How much do they know exists?
I keep hearing different figures. At some point they said 60%, then it was 80%. But now that Israel's controlling a significant amount of Gaza, every time they dig, they find new tunnels that they didn't even know about. So I think the answer is just that Israel just has to keep working at it until it's done. It's sort of like when you catch a bad cold. How much time do I have left with this cold? It's like, you don't know, and it doesn't matter. You just work the problem until it's done.
Yeah, and some people are asking, like, my family's going at this point. My family's like, someone asks, the family's going in March. Is it safe? We don't know. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen. Probably not too soon. That's not going to be as safe. But it's not something you can answer. I feel like when
Well,
it's
I'll tell you this, the number of people who have died during this war since February 28th is less than the number of people who die every day in Israel from traffic accidents.
right.
And that doesn't mean that something big might not happen. Something could happen big that we don't know about. But in terms of the way it is now and has been for the past 2 years, statistically, your chances of dying in Israel are far less than your chances of dying from violent crime in a major American city.
I like that. All right. Julian saying, I heard that Iran has hypersonic missiles and that type of technology is not only impossible to defend from with current technology, but also hard to find the missiles before they are fired. How much of a problem do you feel Iran's hypersonic capability?
I love it. That's so much propaganda. That's being spread by, there's this one guy, I think he was former CIA, who keeps saying this everywhere he can, but he's being funded by Russia. He actually went to prison for like committing treason when he was in the CIA, so he's not credible. And there may be other people saying it too. Everyone's saying it. Most of the missiles Iran has fired at us are hypersonic, and 88% of them get knocked out of the sky. So no, it's not impossible to shoot down a hypersonic missile. We're doing it every single day.
Thanks for clearing that up. Someone said, do you think the Ayatollah M is still alive and well?
The Ayatollah, the original one, or his son?
M.
The Ayatollah.
The letter M. So I guess it's the new one they're talking about.
Oh, the new one. I think he's alive. I don't think he's well. Most of what we're hearing is that he was injured in the strike. He hasn't made any public appearances or even or recorded statements. I don't know if you saw this, but they had this ceremony welcoming him to his new position of power. He attended in the form of a cardboard cutout. And the cardboard cutout, it wasn't even like a picture of his whole body. The cardboard was just like a cardboard box cut in the shape of a person, and they slapped on a photograph of his face on it. And people were cheering him, and one of these top leadership guys was kissing the cardboard to show how much he loves his leader, kissing the cardboard cutout. So I expect he's probably alive, probably not for much longer, but it doesn't sound like he's very well. Or maybe he's just in hiding because he doesn't want to get, hit by a strike. But I also heard some information that some of the major leadership meetings recently had taken place in the hallway of a hospital. Now, maybe they're doing that just to use people as human shields, but it's also possible that that's the hospital where the new leader is recovering from his wounds.
I think we're getting down to it. We have like 9 more questions, I think.
All right.
You've said, do you recall the American media discussion from Trump that there was some unknown structure or sort of shadow chain of command in the Iranian government that Intel discovered? Could you speak to any of that?
I don't know specifically about a shadow chain of command. I do know that Iran has, this is really neat. I gotta explain this. This is great stuff. In June, Israel attacked Iran, knowing that Iran would immediately fire volleys of thousands of ballistic missiles, which are more than our defenses can handle. So what did Israel do? You might know the story, but you might not, so be patient if you do. Some people might not. Israel sent fake text messages and fake phone calls to all of the leadership in the missile chain of command, ordering them to go to a particular place. And they hacked it to make it look like it was genuine and ordering them to stay there. And then the first thing Israel did was blew up that place with everybody in it. So then once Iran realized that they were being attacked, there was nobody to give the order. And when you tried to give the order, there was no one to receive it or carry it out. And it took Iran hours to finally get a command structure back in place. And by the time they did that, Israel had already destroyed so many of their launchers that we still got hit by a lot, but it wasn't thousands. It was dozens and maybe in some cases over 100 at a time. But it made a huge difference. So what did Iran learn from that? You have to have a command structure where you don't need to give an order. So they have all these different groups that react automatically. If someone strikes, you do this. If someone strikes, you do that. And the advantage to that is that taking out the command doesn't allow you to get these independent style groups to stop because they have their independent orders, like a guerrilla network. But that creates a huge disadvantage for Iran, which is that now Iran can't really coordinate strategy because all these different groups are just carrying out the orders that they have and nobody can control them. And so it's not 100% clear whether all of this fire on the Gulf states, for example, was entirely strategic or whether it was these groups that just had their orders and were carrying it out. Even if that was strategic, I think it was bad strategy, but even if it was strategy, there are definitely things going on in Iran that are not the result of coordinated strategy. So that is one thing that I do know is going on right now. If you call that a shadow chain of command or call it something else, but that's something that definitely is happening.
So I think we've got most of the questions done. Most of it's people thanking you and asking for the link to your site again. David Eisenberg did ask a question about Turkey that I don't quite understand. So David, if you want to unmute and ask that question if you're still here. And then after that, if anyone else wants to unmute and ask a question, please feel free, but we'll stop the questions in the chat. David, are you around still? All right. If anyone else has questions, no mic. David has no mic.
Okay. Well, I'll just say this about Turkey. Turkey is did I hear someone talking?
No, go ahead.
Okay. So Turkey is a concern. They're an issue. They seem to have this sort of neo-Ottoman idea that they're going to become an empire. And, in Iran, if Iran was the head of the Shiite axis, which included groups like Hezbollah, then Turkey is the head of the Sunni axis that includes Qatar and groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda. And so that is a concern, but the idea is one step at a time. Where it's not like we are unaware that there might be an attempt to fill a power vacuum, and Israel and I hope the United States and other countries are already thinking ahead to what comes in this post-Iran world, and that will involve Turkey. And hopefully, maybe Turkey can be shown the error of their ways and learn to just hold in place. But if not, there's certainly people thinking this through in advance.
Does anyone else have any other questions? Please feel free to unmute.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
Given Scandinavia's recent threat to arrest Netanyahu upon entering their country, what is Israel's response to that, and how do you see that affecting his ability to travel internationally?
Well, it'll affect his ability to travel to Scandinavia. But so far, the president has traveled to wherever he's needed to, and it hasn't been a problem. Incidentally, New York City also seems to have announced that it's going to arrest Netanyahu, or if not the city, certainly the mayor. Israel's response has always been that these arrest warrants out of the International Criminal Court are not valid, that the International Criminal Court is a political body, not really a judicial body. Israel and the United States are not members of that court for that very reason. Some countries take it on themselves to issue arrest warrants separately from the ICC, but Israel's position has always been that that is a misguided political move, and that all well-meaning countries in the world should oppose it. And in the meantime, the Israelis and the Israeli prime minister have managed to travel to the places they've needed to. Now, what will be interesting is at the next UN General Assembly, if Netanyahu is still the prime minister, he's going to potentially want to travel there, and that takes place in New York. And if Mamdani decides he wants to try and arrest him, that will pit the New York City Police Department against the armed forces of the United States of America. So we'll see what happens there.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I have a question, please. Again, how much do you trust Trump? I don't trust him at all.
We usually don't really talk about politics on these calls.
I'm so sorry.
Which is why I didn't.
Sorry, I take it back.
It's okay if you want to answer. It's just
I'll give you an answer.
Sorry.
I'll give you an answer because it's a good question and there's a good answer to it. I don't trust anybody, not anybody at all. That's what I do. I do analysis. Analysis is the opposite of trusting. It's me constantly digging, figuring things out. How do I know, for example, like I was talking about before, how do I know that Iran is working to produce nuclear weapons? Because they said that they're enriching uranium up to levels that can't be used for anything else. I don't have to take anyone else's word for that. Now, that's not my only source. I put that together with a number of other clues that all point to the same direction. But I do like to say this, and I think it's useful to take through life. I support policies, not people, or I oppose policies, not people. And over time, someone is going to have a policy that I agree with, and they're going to have a policy I disagree with. And when I agree with the policy, I agree with that policy. And I never say to myself, well, I can't support that policy because I don't like that person. I support the policies I support. I oppose the policies I oppose. And I don't take anyone's word for anything, but I do analysis. If you want to trust me, you can read my analysis. But by the way, you don't have to trust me because my analysis very clearly spells out exactly where I'm getting all my information from. I provide a lot of links and I show you how I've put the pieces of the puzzle together. And then you can look at it and see, well, is what Daniel's doing making logical sense to me? Or maybe you see something in it that says, hey, I think he missed something there, and I don't think that it comes together that way.
Okay, Daniel, thank you.
Dan, I have a question.
I am from.
I have a question.
Let me finish telling him. Thank you so much for your answer.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
Dan, I have a question. I sent you an email about this. And one of the commenters, Brett Stevens, yesterday suggested that a good way to cripple Iran was to seize Kharg Island, which is their depot. Do you have any sense of whether that does it make any sense? Is it impractical? That would choke off their oil exports and money?
Yeah, it makes there's some pros and cons. The pros is it would choke off Iran's ability to refine and ship oil, but it would do it without destroying the facilities. So a post-Iran state, a post-Iran government could still have access to those facilities. Obviously, you could just blow the whole thing up, but then it wouldn't be there for later. The downside is it does mean putting boots on the ground, but it means doing it in a very limited way. So I think the United States hasn't gotten to the point where they're ready to start putting boots on the ground, but if they do, that's probably the way that they would go about it. But another reason that America may be holding back for now is because it's always good to have something in reserve, something as a threat that Iran can see, if I go too far over here, they might go over there. But I think my hunch, my intuition is that it's very likely that eventually that will probably happen, only because I heard a statistic today that Iran is currently shipping more oil to China right now than they were even before this war. And eventually the United States is not going to want that to continue.
Thanks.
Sure.
Okay. I'll do like one more question, 2 more questions, if there are any, and then we'll let Dan go. I think this is probably the most questions we've ever had at an Educates program. So that's
well,
wonderful.
I'm so glad that I could answer them and be here with you guys. I've been with you guys since October 7th. Well, even before then, I was a volunteer in Sarel, but I've been talking to you guys since October 7th, and I'll tell you what, it's such a nice energy, and out here, the work that we do is not always easy, and we don't always talk to people who are kind, and talking to you guys it's such a nice feeling. So thank you for being here with me.
Of course.
And I'd like to say that obviously we would like you to contribute to RealityCheck. That would be wonderful because that's how Dan is able to continue doing all of his research and analysis. However, if you do, and even if you don't, sign up on his link for his newsletter because that's where you'll really find all the information and article after article after article about everything that's going on.
You feel like you're getting the truth, the reality, instead of a whole bunch of hullabaloo. All right. Well, thank you, Dan. Thanks for coming yet again, and we hope to see you soon, and stay safe. I'm in shock that you haven't had to run to the Mamad or anything.
I know, look at that. It means we're making some progress. Yeah, IDF and America are doing their jobs.
Yes, that's the sound of progress, the silence. All right. So I guess we'll move into, as Steve says, schmooze mode. If you'd like to stay. Oh, Steve, Pam, you have something to say?
Yeah. So Dan was talking about my Hamal. A Hamal is a war room, in this case, a distribution center. So we're in Tel Aviv. We've been going since the second day of the war. We've taken care of over 76,000 soldiers, more and more every day. As Dan mentioned, first of all, everyone talks about, the war that started, 11 days ago now, or 12 days, whatever it is now, 12 days ago, right? The war has been going since October 7th, okay? Yeah. This is just like a war inside of a war. So the main war never stopped. There is as Dan said, in Gaza, it's still going. You guys don't hear about it. Well, you don't hear that much anymore about anything, but you don't hear unless you're looking at Israeli news or Israeli online reporting. The war in Gaza, or everything going on in Gaza, is still going. We have tons of soldiers down in Gaza. We are giving equipment and supplies to the soldiers down in Gaza every single day. Okay, every day. The West Bank is a hotbed. I always tell people, if you watch Fauda, people hear about the West Bank in Israel and they think, oh, it's the bad places where, it's just terrible to live in the West Bank or to talk about the West Bank or whatever. The West Bank, where the soldiers are, where the fighting is going on, in all of these small little cities, this is like Fauda. If you watch Fauda, this is what happens every single day in the West Bank. A soldier came in today to pick up equipment from Jenin. It's the same as it was in Jenin years and years and years ago. It never ends. In the West Bank, it never ends. And it's very dangerous. David can speak to that because David lives in that region. So he knows what's going on in some of these places. Lebanon is constant. As Dan said, the time we have to the shelter, the time of the sirens and the time of the warnings, we know which are missiles coming from Lebanon or which ones are coming from Iran because of the time that we have to get to our shelters. Lebanon is just all day and all night. Right now, a couple months ago, the north was already, people were going back to the north, back to living in their homes, trying to make their kibbutzim, their moshavim, their homes, their cities, their towns, better, trying to get everything back to normal. Now it's terrible up there. It's really, really bad. Now the south is the safest place to be. You want to live down in the Gaza belt, the Gaza envelope, the safest place in the world right now. So we've got Lebanon. We've got lots of soldiers up in Lebanon. And we also still have soldiers in Syria. So all of those fronts, and that's not talking about the Houthis, which as Dan mentioned. However, they're sort of not a joke, but everybody says, the Houthi rockets, big deal. You don't have to go to a shelter. It's not such a big deal. The Houthis aren't quite so much of a threat as everybody else. But on all those other fronts, and then of course everything coming from Iran, they're all very, very active. They're not letting up. The fighting has not stopped. Just because you don't hear about it doesn't mean it's not there. So the only way to hear about it is to look at Israeli media and RealityCheck, of course, and you'll see what's going on because it's going on strong. And that's all I can say. The soldiers are plus it's freezing cold right now at nighttime. During the day in Tel Aviv, it's starting to get nice, but up in Lebanon and Syria, and in the West Bank too, freezing cold. So we've probably, from our Hamal, we've gone through, I'd say about 40,000 shekels worth of supplies in the last 2 weeks. And I've ordered 5 times from my supplier for warm clothing, for warm hats, warm neck warmers, thermals, gloves, all kinds of things like socks, all kinds of things like that, 4 times in the last, 2 weeks. And I have to make another order tonight. So it's freezing. It's unbelievable how cold it still is. And they're up there freezing. So
thanks, Pam. There's just some people saying you should have called it Judea and Samaria, which you usually do anyway, which is what I was thinking. But anyway, we all love you. All right. So please donate also to Pam's Hamal. very much in need. And now we'll start talking, just schmoozing. So you're welcome to stay on if you want, and if you want to leave, that's okay too. And hopefully we'll see you for the next speaker or just for schmooze in the coming Thursdays. So thanks everyone for coming, and thank you again, Dan. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dan. And David, I do agree with you that it is Judea and Samaria. I just call it the West Bank because that's what